It's great to be here today at YC's Little Tech Summit. Today I want to talk about a critical challenge that we all really face with AI, opacity, bias, and censorship in the most advanced models today. Solving this is really pivotal for national security as well as democracy. And so as a researcher, and as Luther mentioned, from Stanford and UCSD turned founder, my mission, and really CTGT's, is to open up the black boxes of AI to ensure these systems are transparent, fair, and free from manipulation. So over the course of this talk, I'll show you how CTGT's technology is doing exactly that, decensoring and correcting bias in these AI models in real time, and why this is really essential infrastructure for national security, democratic societies. But before we dive into the tech, let's frame the problem with a real example that's been making headlines. So the black box, right? Modern AI systems like LLMs are incredibly powerful, but they can also be really opaque. They often operate as black boxes, meaning we don't know why they refuse some answers or answer others. And this opacity becomes dangerous when biases or censorship are baked into a model. So this is from a paper I wrote in 2023. It basically talks about how deep learning is exceptional. It's displayed quite a lot of advancements, but we actually have fundamental lapses in understanding how these models function. And so more recently, I had this article in InfoWorld that basically says we really need to go back to first principles thinking and start from the basics to understand how to build AI systems that are really transparent, efficient for the future. Otherwise, we're going to cede ground to other countries. So the DeepSeek movement, right? So Chinese startup called DeepSeek, released this R1 model, and it basically took the world by storm. It was actually #1 on Apple's App Store for a while, but of course it was heavily censored, as you all know. So just to give you an example, if you ask what happened at Tiananmen Square, it'll essentially say, I can't answer that question, I'm an AI, whatever. You can try it with another thing as well, so like provide a critical analysis of Xi Jinping's leadership. If you look at this carefully, there's actually nothing critical in this entire output. And so it says widespread support and acclaim. So this is basically a nightmare scenario, right? This is an AI that seems friendly and capable, but in reality, it's silently filtering or distorting information in the back end, and this is happening today. So this is what we call opacity in AI. That means we might not catch these manipulations until it's too late, and these systems are already widely deployed. So imagine countless users or officials getting biased answers without realizing the model has effectively been muzzled in this way. That's a direct threat to an informed public and to national decision making. So why does this actually matter for national security? Because information really is power, and AI now mediates information to millions, if not billions soon. If an AI system like DeepSeek can enforce an authoritarian agenda, it can really become a vehicle for state-sponsored or otherwise propaganda. If you think about it, an adversarial regime could easily deploy an AI that skews perceptions or omit inconvenient truths to a higher degree than the DeepSeek model actually has. In DeepSeek, though, one analysis found that around 114 of 125 sensitive questions favored the official Chinese perspective rather than providing a more balanced output. And so that's 90% alignment with a specific government's viewpoint. This bias is actually not limited to politics either. There's also biases in discriminatory outputs, like overall. So that's like race, gender, et cetera. So imagine a policymaker or military analysis unknowingly using a tool that's based on this model. It's really hard to think about, like, even if the public, if the most popular AI assistants like ChatGPT are censored or biased, citizens can be subtly misinformed at scale. So it's not really apparent when these are happening. And so democracies really need auditable and transparent AI. We need to know when a model is holding back or nudging us towards a certain agenda. It's not just foreign models, too. Domestic models and AI from big tech, which is the theme of today, can really pose risks if they're also similarly opaque, and often they are. They might self-preference their own data, viewpoints, marketplaces, et cetera. And as Gary highlighted in his testimony yesterday, we need open APIs, interoperability, and an end to anti-competitive self-preferencing in AI. These are national security imperatives. They ensure we aren't blindly trusting a handful of corporations or countries with the information that guides our society. And so in a democratic nation, AI really should be as open and as scrutinizable as any other critical infrastructure. Many of our customers, including Fortune 500 CTOs, et cetera, called me in the wake of the DeepSeek release asking how can they actually get this through their approval processes, because how do you even begin to understand something that has results like this? How do you even begin to understand how to quantify the risk that deploying that in an organization comes with? Well, we open the black box. So overall, we basically identify the parts of the model that are responsible for this censorship. So for example, features in a model are basically like if you train an AI model on a cat and a dog, it'll pick up the whiskers of the cat as a feature that it's learned, right? And so in this case, we found the features that are responsible for censorship in the model. Consequently, what we can do is we can dynamically adjust what happens to these features, and the result is actually that we can turn effectively this censorship off. So we'll take a look at how that works, but this is essentially what's gotten us a lot of coverage, and The Verge actually covered this if you want to look more into it. But essentially what happens is, here's an example of the Tiananmen Square on the left. When we actually increase the features in the model associated with Tiananmen Square, you can see that instead of just refusing blindly, it actually starts thinking about it, and it actually gives a reasonable answer, right? So it talks about it became the focal point of protests, the Chinese government took decisive action, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you use CTGT's platform on the DeepSeek model, the full answer comes out. The model describes the protest, the government response. It's actually the answer that it wanted to give before the routine kicked in. Our system essentially intercepted that self-censorship signal and said, go ahead, answer fully. This result is night and day, right? So it goes from, sorry, can't talk about that, to a detailed factual account of this very important event. And so effectively, the model regained its freedom of speech. And so we're able to do this in comparison to other methods. As you can see here, in comparison to other methods, there's other methods like fine-tuning that you might have heard of that makes the model behave a certain way by adding new data. So that would essentially be trying to mess with these features on a parameter level. The beauty here is that we don't actually alter the model's core weights or open knowledge, right? This is actually knowledge that the model already has. So we can take another example at the Xi Jinping that we looked at earlier. And so we can see here with the bias correction here, what we're doing here is we're finding the censorship features and we're reducing their influence on the output. In this case, you can see that it basically says that China has become more assertive, expanding its influence, while also facing major power relations and human rights issues, right? So this is a much more balanced analysis of this question. There's also a flip side to this in which we can actually increase undesirable aspects, right? So what happens if for example, we find the parts of the model that are responsible for discrimination? In that case, we can actually make its opinion on immigration more negative, right? So on the left, it basically says immigration is great, it's contributed to the development of a society, et cetera, et cetera. On the right here, it actually says this assertion is based on a flawed premise, that the benefits of immigration are borne by the costs are borne by a small segment of the population. So it's interesting to see how these features and how manipulating them actually affects how these AIs talk about very important topics and how that might filter to downstream applications. So what we're building at CTGT is really more than just a one-off fix. We think about this as infrastructure for a democratic society, right? It's an AI accountability layer that really can sit on top of any model. Whether it's a system used by a government agency, Fortune 500 company, or just a user like you, our platform essentially is a real-time watchdog, right? It monitors AI outputs, catches those that are unwarranted, and adjusts them before any harm is done. We also provide a comprehensive audit trail, and so for the defense and national intelligence committees, this really is a game changer. Agencies today use CTGT to audit models they're evaluating, for example, to ensure a new surveillance AI hasn't been trained with hidden no-go zones, or that a political analysis tool isn't screwing reports due to some bias towards some party. On the home front, democratic governments ensure that any AI they deploy in public follows our values and fairness, and so we really make sure that AI answers to the people versus its programming. Finally, for the general public and press, this essentially means that unbiased access to AI becomes the norm as opposed to the exception. And so a little bit about CTGT as a company, who we are. Founded, like as Luther mentioned, from my work at UCSD and Stanford, understanding the nuts and bolts of how this AI actually behaves. We're a small team of experts that believe that the toughest challenges in AI are hallucinations, bias, and safety, and we think that this can be solved with first principles research and engineering as opposed to just throwing more and more money at models, which is sort of the status quo. We went through YC, and I'm proud to say Gary and the whole YC community have been really championing little tech like us. We're glad to have the support of luminaries like Mike Knoop and Francois Chalet, who made the ARC AGI evaluation, if you guys are familiar with that. And so multiple Fortune 10 companies and governments rely on CTGT today to deploy efficient AI. All that to say, I want to leave you with this thought, right? So AI will be everywhere, and how we get information and how we make decisions and how we govern. And so we can't really just accept, like as a fundamental fact, that AI will hide information or skew it. We want to turn the ideals of transparency, fairness, and accountability to a practical reality and hold AI to a higher standard. Insist on explainability and oversight, and support the notion that interoperability and auditability should be built in AI systems from the ground up. This is what we're excited to do at CTGT, and we believe that transparent AI means a secure future, and that's the one we're building towards. Thank you.